What do you think is scarier than encountering an 8-foot tall Tyranid bioform with massive scything talons, a drooling maw filled with razor-sharp fangs, and a nightmare-inducing visage? How about looking up at an equally terrifying bioform the size of a continent, breaching the Earth's atmosphere, and having its tentacle-like arms snake their way down to crush everything around you? Well, that's a Tyranid ship in a nutshell, a gargantuan living creature that hurtles through space and arrives on a planet in order to birth millions of other smaller bioforms that are all interconnected through a hive mind and want nothing more than to consume every last piece of biomass in existence, including you. These bioships, as they are referred to in the Tyranid lore, are not only scary, but they are another reason why the Nids are truly the most alien species in the entire 40k galaxy. And they're what we're going to talk about today in another episode of 40 Facts About the 40k Universe. If you're new to the channel, allow me to introduce myself. I am your host, Gershwan. I will be your guide through this bizarre and horrifying universe that is Warhammer 40k. I post lore videos every single day, so if you want to learn more, please subscribe to the channel. I am also celebrating Nidvember, a whole month dedicated to Tyranid lore videos, so if you have any questions or suggestions on the topic of the Great Devourer, please leave a comment down in the comment section below. And if you're enjoying the lore videos I've created so far this month and want to see more of this style of content, please smash your tentacle-like fingers onto the like button to encourage me to keep creating Tyranid lore videos and to let YouTube know that you want to see more 40k videos. But with all that said, let's get into 40 facts and lore on the Tyranid bioships. When we read or discuss the Tyranid lore, it's important to remember that we almost always get information through the perspective of another faction that is describing their findings and observations about the Tyranids rather than the hive mind itself. This is obviously done because you and I cannot fathom the inner workings of a hive intelligence, and talking about the Tyranid bioships is an excellent example of this conundrum, because although we have a variety of imperial classifications and descriptions of the different types of ships found in a standard hive fleet, at the end of the day, these things are living creatures. They evolve and manipulate their biological makeup in order to fulfill whatever role they need to fulfill in order to stay alive or to preserve the hive mind. This means no two Tyranid ships are identical. They might have similar directives, but the details of a hive ship that belongs to Hive Fleet Behemoth, for example, will look and act radically different than a hive ship of another fleet like Hive Fleet Leviathan. But despite these differences, the core purpose of each ship is to gather the raw materials and biomass necessary for the expansion of the Tyranid species. And so even though the Imperial Navy might view a specific ship as a cruiser or a battleship, it seems that at any moment these ships can shed their specialties and return to a primary objective. But before we dive into the Imperium of Man's attempt to catalog all of these different types of bioships, let's first talk about some of the standard morphological traits of a bioship. For the most part, Tyranid ships are protected by a thick chitinous armor that appears stone-like but is as strong as plasteel. This armor is segmented and then layered throughout the ship in order to maximize defense but also maintain mobility. To us humans, it looks very similar to the exoskeleton of arthropods, but it's tough enough to absorb lance or torpedo weapon fire. To add to their resiliency, most bioships are protected by a thick cloud of defensive spores that not only act as a smokescreen, but also absorb and spread out the initial impact of a weapon, dispersing much of the concussive energy of a projectile. Each ship has key locations where their armor can pull back to reveal weapon growths, most commonly some form of pyroacid battery. These weapon growths are only exposed when the bioship is close to an enemy ship. This is because the toxins and the pyroacid that are launched out of these batteries are short-range projectiles. Their main purpose is to disintegrate the enemy ship's hull so that the Tyranid ship can unleash hordes of smaller Tyranid creatures into the enemy ship. And since we're on the topic of ranged weaponry, it's a good time to point out that the majority of these ships evolve specifically for short-range void battles. The only somewhat effective long-range weapon they possess are biotorpedoes, which are living bioforms that burrow out of the hive ship and launch themselves into the void, where they then seek out enemy vessels and explode on impact. They also have massive biocannons that launch highly corrosive maggot-like bioforms that splatter against the enemy ship. These biocannons also have a longer range because the entire hive ship receives a massive electrochemical shock that causes muzzle spasms that spew forth the projectile, unlike the other weapons that rely on their own localized, sometimes self-generated power. The most impressive ranged weapon on these ships is a massive plasma-emitting spine that launches gargantuan balls of bioplasma at a target. Although this projectile can cause debilitating damage to any enemy ship, it's also short-ranged, so intelligent enemy ship captains have learned to get the most out of their range advantage before the Hive fleet arrives on a planet. Now, in order to answer why the Tyranids haven't evolved a solution to this range disadvantage, we have to look at how these Hive fleets operate. For the most part, they rely on sheer numbers. There are so many bioships that make up a single Hive fleet that it would be nearly impossible for a defending force to stop a tendril from reaching its destination. And at the end of the day, that's all the bioships really want to do. They want the collective fleet to reach the endpoint. It will certainly fight other battle fleets and if necessary split off a portion of their fleet to pursue a weakened enemy, but these situations are seldom of any significance, because the hive mind is focused on reaching the target planet and consuming all of that biomass. It would much rather barrel through Imperial blockades or Sentry battle fleets while taking heavy casualties rather than fight a void battle that will yield very little resources. This is also why most bioships haven't evolved around speed. They are much slower than most conventional spaceships found in the 40K universe, but it works for them, because their prey isn't going anywhere. It's not like these planets are just gonna run away. Now, the truly foolish or desperate ship captains engage the Tyranids in close-quarter void battles, where the bioships demonstrate their true power. Almost all bioships possess some form of monstrous maw. Some have a front-facing jaw, while others hide their mouths similar to an octopus or a squid. These massive jaws serve three purposes. The first is the undeniable terror it causes to the enemy crew as they connect it to the spacefaring sea monsters of ancient legends, basically bringing down the morale of the enemy ship to zero. The second is to act as a battering ram, as the void ship literally takes a bite out of the enemy vessel, crushing more surface area than a standard battleship ram and beginning the consumption process. And the third is to latch onto the enemy ship so that there is zero chance of escape. This means that once engaged by a bioship, the crew's only hope for survival is abandoning their ship. To assist in wrangling the enemy vessel and maneuvering it around its mouth, the bioships have massive tentacle-like appendages that jut out of the ship's hull. The number and size of these tentacles vary, but some can grow double the length of a ship's hull. Like most predatory sea creatures, these tentacles have spiked suction cups that latch onto other ships and begin to burrow inside. Once the victim ship is breached by these massive spikes, the tentacles open up to disgorge thousands of smaller bioforms that tear through the enemy crew. This means the victim ship is not only being consumed from the outside, but their internal workings are being destroyed simultaneously. Aside from tentacles, some Tyranid bioships have massive claws that serve not only to latch onto the enemy vessel, but also tear enormous gashes into the enemy ship. Once cracked open, the bioship launches smaller swarms of void-capable bioforms that bore through these openings and begin to disgorge even more Tyranid creatures. This demonstrates how overwhelming it can be to fight a hive ship. One minute the captain sees a massive creature flying towards them, the next it's a swarm that appears almost out of nowhere, biting and clawing their way into the ship. Now that we covered the standard traits of most of these ships, let's take a look at how the Imperium has categorized each ship, starting with what they think acts like the central node of the entire Hive fleet and possesses direct control over the hive mind, the Hive ship. Hive ships are huge compared to the rest of the bioships in their fleet, and they have the most armaments. Because of this, they also produce the most amount of bioforms. This includes the smaller bioships known as ether swimming brutes that get launched out into the void and act as attack and boarding ships. The larger the tendril or the invading fleet, the more hive ships that will be present to strengthen the synaptic connection between all of the different bioforms that are sent out to invade enemy vessels and planets. Shortly after the 13th Black Crusade, the Imperium encountered the largest recorded bioship, which technically is categorized as a hive ship, but was referred to as the Ancient One by the admiral that had the displeasure of fighting this gigantic space monster. Now, smaller than a hive ship, but large enough to go head-to-head with an enemy cruiser or a heavy cruiser, are the Devourers. These bioships assist the hive ship and act as a slightly more mobile void ship that can lead independent missions towards invading enemies or just about anything the hive mind wants destroyed. To assist the Devourer cruisers are the light cruisers known as Void Prowlers. Unlike the Devourers, these bioships evolved to carry a very specific weapon, one of the many range or close combat weapons we talked about earlier. When the Hive fleet needs to go on the offensive towards another battle fleet, it relies on bioships that are similar in size to the Devourer, called Razor Fiends. These creatures seem to be created when the hive mind wants to rip apart a specific enemy vessel. They possess some form of ship ram that is meant to pull apart the enemy rather than consume it. There were also huge swarms of frigate-sized bioships classified as Kraken, and they were created by the Hive ship to act as escorts and scout vessels. These are rare, as most Hive fleet utilize a different form of escorts, simply called escort drones, and they have less weapons and are mostly meant to defend a larger bioship. And the last spacefaring bioship we're going to talk about today are the boarding worms, which almost always resemble large leeches that latch onto the enemy vessel and chew their way into the hull before disgorging a complement of smaller Tyranid organisms. Boarding worms are capable of carrying anything from standard small combat species like the Hormigond to even a Carnifex. Now, as more and more Tyranid Hive fleets enter the galaxy, new and unusual bioships are being encountered during every assault. This means that we as players have the creative freedom to write our own descriptions of Tyranid bioships and their purposes in the grand scheme of things. And if you do come up with your own idea for a bioship, I would love to hear what it is. Comment down in the comment section below. As I was reading this, I thought, how badass would it be to have a bioship that's just a giant serpent that's, going through the galaxy, kind of like the serpent. I think it's the Serpent of Time from God of War, where Kratos is fighting the Norse gods. But having something like that that's just like snaking its way through the galaxy, basically whenever it lands on a planet, it's like, this is your end time. I am the time serpent or whatever. Saying that it's game over, almost like death. That would be really badass. But if you come up with your own idea for a bioship, like I said, just let me know what it is. Also, if you have any questions about the Tyranids or any suggestions, comment down in the comment section below, because for the first 2 days that this video is up, I'm going to be answering as many questions as I can. I've been going back to the old November videos that I posted last week and answering questions there. So yeah, let's just open up that dialogue. And if you guys have any suggestions for next month, because I see that you guys really enjoy this like faction focus month thing. So if you guys have any ideas for what the faction should be for next month, let me know what it is. And thank you guys. Thank you for smashing the like button, showing me all your support in the comment section, and just being, interactive and stuff. If you guys want to keep helping the channel, again, smash the like button, share with your friends, and subscribe. But yeah, I'll talk to you guys tomorrow. This is Gershwin with One Mind Syndicate, signing out.
Oh, if you could put my freedom